At the reunion, my parents announced, "Bailey is moving in with you, her, Mark, and the kids." I said nothing. When they arrived with her boxes, a stranger opened my old door and, "I'm called Eric, and I've reached 28 years. Should you question my folks, they'd likely claim I was the troublesome child among us, not due to defiance or carelessness. In fact, it's the reverse. I toiled diligently, covered my own expenses, and maintained my existence neatly. Yet to them, this merely crowned me the go-to fixer, the one presumed to offer extra whenever another family member faltered. And by another, I'm referring to my elder sibling, Bailey. Bailey hit 31, though her lifestyle wouldn't hint at it. She has 3 children, Aiden, 7, Sophia, 5, and little Emma, 2, but parenthood never convinced her to grow up. Her husband Mark, 33, shares her aversion to responsibility. Between them, they'd never clung to a consistent position beyond a handful of weeks, perpetually armed with reasons for dodging rent, and somehow persuaded my parents their woes weren't their doing. They had a knack for spinning every scenario to paint themselves the martyrs. Her supervisor always schemed against her. His boss was always jealous of his potential. Their landlords were vindictive, their housemates were venomous, and the employment scene was ruthless. All the while, they drifted in a loop, hopping from my parents' home to whichever pal was gullible enough to lend them their couch. 3 kids in tow, leaving chaos in their wake. I grasped early that a calm, steady life demanded distance from them. My apartment, a hard-earned 2-bedroom I purchased after years of saving, was my sanctuary. I decorated it minimally but comfortably. Clean lines, organized spaces, nothing excessive. Just peace. The kind of peace impossible to maintain with 5 extra people, 3 of them under the age of 8. It wasn't simple though. My parents loved dragging me into her messes, often wielding guilt about supporting kin or my fortune in landing a solid career. The kids need stability, they'd say, as if I alone could provide what their parents couldn't. That's why I'd labored to erect limits, to signal I wasn't her fallback cushion. But as I'd soon uncover, my parents never truly honored those lines. They just bided their time to bypass them entirely. Everything peaked at a family supper. I should have spotted the clues the instant I stepped into their abode. My mother was overly warm, my father oddly hushed, and Bailey and Mark scarcely met my gaze. The kids were unusually subdued, though Aiden kicked my chair throughout dinner. Trouble brewed, but I couldn't fathom its depth. The meal kicked off tamely, routine chatter sprinkled with my mom's sly digs about my rare visits. "You know, Eric, your nieces and nephew barely recognize you anymore," she said, watching me over her wineglass. "You should come by more often." I mostly bobbed my head, eyeing my plate, eager for the evening's end. Then just as I thought I'd slip away unscathed, my mom lowered her utensil, clasped her palms on the tabletop, and dropped the bombshell. "So, Kellen," she cooed in that syrupy tone she wielded for unwelcome news. "Your sister and her family will be staying with you a while." I nearly gagged on my bite. The air stilled, thick with their expectation that I'd nod and carry on. But I held my tongue, not yet, sitting there, peering at them, awaiting the full tale, because there was always more. "True enough," she pressed on. "She's hit a tough patch recently, and you've got that fine space all to yourself," she reasoned, as if it were pure logic. "It's practical. You can lift her up, and she won't weigh on it. Weigh on them, because perish the thought my parents might demand Bailey and Mark own their choices. No. That duty was mine, it seemed. Still, I stayed mute, observing their pitch unfurl like a sluggish wreck. "Yeah," my dad piped up, finally tossing in his bit. "It's not like you're strapped, and they just need a steady spot to sort themselves." That's when Bailey chimed in. "Just a couple months," she purred, her words sounding too polished. "And we can pitch in around your place too." A blatant fib. We all knew it. Bailey and Mark didn't lift a finger. They barely tidied their own chaos, let alone manage 3 children properly. I'd seen their previous apartment once, toys scattered like landmines, dishes crusted with week-old food, laundry in piles that seemed to reproduce overnight. Yet I didn't flinch, just dipped my head faintly as if mulling it over. "The kids need their uncle," Mark added, finally looking up from his phone. "You know how much they love you." The children in question were currently engaged in a silent battle under the table, Sophia pinching Aiden, Emma smearing mashed potatoes on her high chair. None of them had spoken a word to me all evening. Truth was I was biding time, letting them roll out their plea, letting them lock into this plan, letting them blunder biggest by presuming I'd cave. I stretched the quiet just enough to rattle them. Their stares bore into me, braced for fury, dismay, pushed back, but I offered none. Instead, I breathed out, laid my utensil aside, and nodded. "Fine," I said plainly. For a beat, no one uttered a sound. My mom blinked, caught off guard by my swift consent. My dad eased as if he'd steeled for a clash. Bailey and Mark exchanged glances of relief and triumph, like they'd claimed a victory they hadn't even earned. "Really?" my mom prodded, eyes narrowing. I shrugged. "Sure, if it gets Bailey and her family steady, why not?" That sealed it. My mom and dad quickly calmed down, and my mom started a long talk about how happy she was that I was being a good brother. My dad nodded like he agreed, and Bailey and Mark, who seemed ready to fight, just sat back in their chairs with pleased looks. I could tell their minds were already busy. They probably thought they tricked me perfectly, that I'd given in just like they and my parents wanted. I could imagine them planning to move into my place, picking which rooms they'd take for themselves and the kids, thinking about how they'd change stuff to suit them, and why not? They'd gotten away with it before. When we were kids, she'd take my shirts and pretend to be surprised when I got upset. In college, she took my laptop and forgot to return it. When they got their first place and couldn't pay rent, she talked our parents into making me help them out. Just that one time, of course, but it was never just once. When Aiden was born, it was, Eric, we need a crib. With Sophia, Eric, we need a bigger car. With Emma, Eric, we need help with daycare. Always presented as a one-time emergency, always becoming a regular expense I somehow inherited. Bailey and Mark didn't just feel owed things. They were great at bending the truth, making themselves seem weak and me look mean whenever I said no. But this time, they didn't know what was coming. So when's the family moving in? I asked lightly, eating another bite like it was no big deal. My mom practically glowed. Oh, we thought this weekend. So they can settle in before looking for jobs again. This weekend. Great. Bailey stretched her arms behind her head like she'd won a prize. Yeah. We don't have much anyway. Just clothes and a few boxes and the kids' stuff. It'll be quick to set up. I nodded again, acting like it was all okay with me. Sounds fine. Just tell me when, and I'll be there. That part wasn't a lie. I'd definitely be there. Not at the apartment, though. No. I'd be somewhere way better, watching from far off as Bailey, Mark, the kids, my parents, and a car packed with their things pulled up to my old place, the one I hadn't lived in for weeks, the one I'd sold, the one some new person owned now who had no clue what was coming, and I wouldn't stop them. Not yet. I'd let them figure out what their little idea had gotten them into. The days before that weekend felt super slow. Every time I thought about what was going to happen, a smile started on my face, but I stayed chill around my parents. I didn't want them to suspect anything. Instead, I let everything happen just like I'd pictured, like a slow crash I could watch from the side. Saturday came, and I spent the day away from the apartment doing stuff I'd been putting off for weeks. I treated myself to breakfast at my favorite diner, browsed a bookstore, and even got a haircut. My new condo across town, smaller but all mine, with no family knowing its location, waited for my return. Perfect timing. My parents would get to the apartment ready to drop off Bailey's family's things, and they'd soon see something was really off. Around noon, my phone rang. I didn't know the number, so I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again, and this time I picked up. Hi, I said, trying to sound normal. Eric? My mom's voice came through sharp with annoyance. What's happening? I could hear my dad in the background getting louder too, and what sounded like children crying. They weren't mad yet, just mixed up, lost, like they'd walked into the wrong place or something weird was going on. What do you mean? I asked, acting confused. We just got here, my mom went on, her voice shaky. What's this? The apartment's gone. The landlord says it was sold weeks ago, and someone new lives here now. I couldn't stop it. My mouth turned into a grin. Oh, really? That's strange. I didn't know, I said, pretending to be the puzzled son who had no part in it. Guess I should have said something earlier. My father's tone sliced through, rough with irritation. What's happening, Eric? Why didn't you warn us? You said Bailey could stay, and now we're stranded here with her junk and 3 overtired kids. It took all my strength not to crack up laughing. I could hear Bailey behind him, her voice rising, frantic, like she was scrambling to understand what was going on. Mark was swearing loudly, and the children were all wailing now. It was pure delight to my ears. Listen, I'm not sure what to say, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I thought you all knew I'd left that place weeks back, sold it off, didn't figure I had to bring it up since, well, it didn't matter to me anymore. A short quiet fell over the line. What do you mean sold it? My mom asked, her voice shaky like she was struggling to grasp it. You got rid of your apartment and didn't even tell us? Yep, I said, stretching out my words. It was a quick choice, to be honest. Didn't want to turn it into a huge thing, but, yeah, I'm out. Fresh start and all that. My dad's voice climbed higher. So what do we do now, Eric? You can't just dump this on us. Bailey had her plans, and we've already loaded her stuff. The kids are tired and hungry. Don't you think we deserved a heads up? I tilted back in my chair, fighting to hide the grin creeping onto my face. I was soaking this up. You know, I really thought you'd be aware, I said, drawing it out. I figured you were clued in. I tend to keep stuff to myself. You know how I am. Maybe I should have rung you when I moved. But, honestly, it didn't seem like a big deal. You didn't ask, and I didn't say. The aggravation was thick on their end of the call. I could hear Emma's piercing wail in the background, Sophia demanding a snack, and Aiden complaining loudly about being bored. My mom's voice now carried a hint of despair, like she'd been totally caught off guard. But you told us you were good there. You said you liked your apartment. Sure I did, I answered smoothly, tossing in just enough coolness to sound unbothered. But things shift, I guess. Didn't plan to let it go like that, but the deal was too sweet to pass up. A heavy stillness settled for a moment, interrupted only by Bailey muttering faintly in the distance and Mark's colorful cursing. My dad spoke up again first, his voice quivering with fury. Why didn't you tell us, Kellen? He demanded, his words sharp and blaming. You could have at least given us a hint. Now we're trapped in this chaos. And Bailey and the kids. I cut him off before he could keep going. Look, Dad. You're acting like I messed up. I'm just living my own way, and this was my call. You know how I roll. I do what's best for me and don't run it by everyone else every time. I mean, I'm not a little kid anymore. My mom jumped in before my dad could fire back. So what are we supposed to do now? Are you going to sort this out, or do we just haul Bailey's stuff back home? Where will they all sleep? We don't have room. I let her words float there for a beat before replying. Well, I said, pausing for a little extra punch, I guess that's your choice. You could always, work it out yourself. I'm sure there's a comfy couch out there somewhere for Bailey's family to crash on. Maybe they can finally try supporting themselves for once. Another long hush followed. I could almost taste the strain through the phone. My mom's next words came out soft, barely there, laced with shock and anger. This isn't right, Eric. You're just going to dump this on us to handle? What about the children? I let out a big sigh, leaning even deeper into my chair. Look. I'm sorry. Guess I should have clued you in earlier. But, life just happens sometimes. You can't always count on me to clean up the mess. Bailey and Mark are adults with responsibilities. Maybe it's time they face them. Bailey's voice burst through again, louder now, a mix of annoyance and fear. What's all this, Kellen? Where are we supposed to go? The kids need stability. I smirked. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Maybe you should have sorted things out on your own before leaning on others to fix your stuff. Maybe you and Mark should have considered your children's need for stability before quitting every job you've ever had. The sound of Bailey mumbling under her breath made my smile grow even bigger, but I wasn't finished yet. I had them exactly where I wanted them, and I was liking this way too much to drop it. Anyway, gotta bounce, I said breezily, wrapping up the call quick. Good luck with it all though. I'm sure you'll figure it out. The kids are resilient, right? That's what you always say when you move them around. And with that, I hung up, my fingers still tingling from the buzz I just stirred up. I didn't realize it yet, but this was just the start. I spent the rest of my day with an odd blend of glee and excitement, letting the mess I'd kicked off brew a little longer. I understood my folks weren't the sort to simply quit. They acted puzzled at first, sure, but that was just the opening act. Once they grasped they were truly in a bind, that's when the real show would start. And Bailey and Mark, they'd likely pull their usual trick of acting helpless, but I wasn't planning to let them wiggle free. Not this time. Not with 3 kids they couldn't support and a history of mooching that stretched back years. By the time I reached my place, the sun was slipping below the skyline, painting a gentle golden light across everything. I stepped inside my apartment, turned the lock, and sank into the sofa to relax. I felt so peaceful, I didn't even have a shred of regret. This was my comeback, plain, sweet justice for all the times they used me, twisted me, and treated me like a fallback when their plans fell apart. About an hour later, a tap sounded at the door. I snapped awake, instantly on edge. I peeked through the peephole, and my pulse jumped. It was them. My parents, Bailey, Mark, the 3 kids, and, get this, their stuff. Their minivan sat out front, stuffed with boxes and sacks stacked tall, like a scene ripped from a cheesy TV show. For a second, I just stood there, gawking at them through the tiny lens, feeling a twisted kind of joy. They'd actually hunted me down. The kicker, they had no clue I lived here now. They thought they were just rolling up to my new spot, but they were about to stumble right into a showdown. I eased the door open slowly, keeping myself steady, cool, and in charge. Eric, my mom's voice came first, shaky, almost begging. We tried ringing you, but you didn't answer. We sorted out where you're staying now. I lifted an eyebrow. Oh, did you? How'd you pull that off? Forget that, my dad jumped in, his tone prickly. We need to chat. You've got to fix this. You said Bailey could stay here, and now she's got her gear and the kids. We've got nowhere else to turn. Behind them, Aiden was running in circles on my lawn, Sophia was sitting sullenly on a suitcase, and Emma was asleep in Mark's arms, her chubby face tear-streaked in red. I rested against the doorframe, lazily folding my arms across my chest. Here's the deal though, isn't it? I never said Bailey and her family could move in here. My dad's eyes popped wide, and I could sense his temper fraying. Come on, Eric. Don't turn this into a bigger mess. You can't just ditch us like this. We drove all this way, and now you're just going to say no to helping your sister? What kind of brother does that? What kind of uncle? Bailey, hovering just past my parents, shot me a hard stare. I could practically see her brain scrambling to figure it out, piecing things together right then and there. This is insane, Eric, she snapped. You told me we could move in, and now you're pretending you don't even recognize. We've been in your life long enough for you to act decent about this. The kids are exhausted. Emma's been crying all day. Is that right? I said, holding back a smirk. You really believe you can just stroll into my place like it's some kind of motel? All 5 of you? I could pinpoint the exact second they realized they'd screwed up big. The understanding crept in slow, but it slammed them like a freight train. I was here. This apartment was mine, my true home, and they'd shown up with Bailey's bags and children banking on a free pass. Bailey's cheeks blazed bright red with fury. Mark stepped forward, his face dark with anger. What's this, Eric? You're really going to pull this on us after everything? On my kids? I stayed silent for a few moments, watching their faces twist from bewilderment to irritation and finally to shame. This was it. The instant they saw they'd been outsmarted and the instant I chose to twist the knife even deeper. Look, I said, stepping nearer to them. I don't know how to say this any plainer. This is my apartment. I didn't sell it. I didn't hand it over. I'm not giving out a free spot for anyone. Not anymore. Especially not for 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. Where did you even think everyone would sleep? I could tell my parents were wrestling to wrap their heads around my words. My mom looked like she wanted to argue, but she held back. The thought that I, Kellen, the one they always shoved around, was now blocking their path was too much for her to swallow. You tricked us, Kellen, my dad snarled. You tricked us about everything. You knew this would happen, and now you're just leaving us to sort out your sister's mess. Your nieces and nephew are suffering because of your games. I shrugged. I didn't trick you. You just didn't ask the right stuff. And maybe my nieces and nephew are suffering because their parents refused to take responsibility for their own lives. Bailey pushed forward now, hands planted on her hips, glaring hard. You're not even a real brother or uncle. I'm family, Eric, and you're just going to toss me aside like this? What happened to sticking together? What about my children? Don't you care about them at all? I stared at her, blank-faced. I'm not tossing you out. I'm just not swinging the door wide for you. And I do care about your kids, enough to hope that someday they have parents who actually provide for them instead of coasting on other people's generosity. The air grew heavy with strain. It felt like a massive storm was brewing, and I was the quiet before the madness. I could hear Bailey's tone climbing, a mix of irritation and panic. Mark was pacing now, muttering threats under his breath. My father was walking back and forth, grumbling quietly to himself. My mother was teetering on the edge of losing it, her cheeks red with fury. Aiden had stopped running and was now watching the adults with wide, frightened eyes. Sophia had begun to cry softly. It was almost too simple. Then Bailey barked, "Fine. If you won't let us inside, we'll just make you." My pulse jumped as she moved toward the entrance, Mark a step behind her with Emma still in his arms. For a fleeting second, I wondered if they'd really try to shove their way through, but that was when I decided I'd had my fill. I inhaled deeply, stepped up, and slipped my phone from my pocket. I didn't utter a sound, just tapped in the police number. "Hi," I said, my voice even and cool. "I need to report people trespassing." My parents and Bailey froze solid, their faces draining of color as they caught on to what I was up to. Mark took a step back, instinctively pulling Emma closer. I kept my gaze locked on them while I spoke to the dispatcher, explaining everything smoothly. "I've told my family to go," I said, my tone steady, "but they won't budge. They're trying to barge into my apartment without my okay, and I don't feel safe." I flicked my eyes to Bailey, seeing her expression twist with rage and shock. My mom had gone totally quiet, and my dad looked like he was scrambling to save his dignity. "This'll turn out rotten for you, Eric," Bailey hissed, her words dripping with spite. I gave a small smile, my voice firm. "We'll find out, won't we? We'll see." As I hung up with the dispatcher, the full impact of my choice sank in. What happened next was beyond my control. It was time for them to face the music. The faint wail of a siren in the distance was my only heads up before the cops rolled up. My family stood stiff, staring at me with wide nervous eyes like they thought I'd cave at the last moment, but I didn't twitch. I was so done. I dealt with their sneaky games for years, and this was when I'd finally take back my space, my calm, and my life. The cop who climbed out of the patrol car was a tall lady with short clipped brown hair and a no-joke vibe. She looked at me first, then at my parents, Bailey, Mark, and the children, who were now fidgeting awkwardly on the doorstep. They seemed like kids busted sneaking into a place they didn't belong, ironically fitting. Evening, the cops said, her voice strong but civil. I hear there's a problem here. I nodded, my tone cool, but with a bite. Yes, officer. These folks, I waved at my parents, sister, and her family, are trespassing. They showed up at my place expecting to move in without my say-so. I've told them to leave over and over, and now I'm worried they might try to push their way inside. The cop glanced at my parents, then at Bailey and Mark, taking in the 3 children with a slight frown. Is that right? She asked, her voice fair, but straight to the point. My parents paused. They obviously didn't want to own up to their mistake, but the facts were already laid bare. Bailey spoke up first, her voice thick with annoyance and refusal. He's making it up, she snapped, arms folded tight. He asked us here. We came to move in like he promised, and now he's trying to kick us out after all I've done for him. I'm his sister. These are his nieces and nephew. We've earned this. The cop didn't blink at her flare-up. Ma'am, if Mr. Kellen says this is his place and he's told you to go, then you're trespassing. You can't just roll up to someone's house without an invite and expect them to let you stay. I could see my parents squirming, trying to slip out of the mess, shifting uneasily under the cop's stare. Look, officer. We didn't mean trouble, my dad said, raising his hands. Well, we figured Eric would be okay with it. We've bailed him out before, and he owes us. This isn't right. The children need a place to stay. The cop's face stayed steady. I get that you might have expected something, sir, but that doesn't mean you can cross someone else's lines or property. You need to go now. All of you. The strain in the air was so heavy, you could slice it. My parents swapped glances, and I could almost feel the rage bubbling inside them, but they were out of moves. The cop stayed calm, but she wasn't about to let them cause a fuss. She faced Bailey and Mark. You can go peacefully now, or we'll have to walk you out. Bailey let out an annoyed snarl. She was burning with anger, and I could tell her mind was racing, wondering if she could fight this somehow. But before she could spit out another word, the cop moved closer, her tone solid. Ma'am, this is your final notice. If you don't leave, I'll arrest you for trespassing, in front of your children. Those words slammed into my sister like a heavy load. Mark tugged at her arm, whispering something urgent. Bit by bit, grudgingly, she stepped back from the entrance, shooting me a look like I'd stabbed her in the back. My parents trailed behind them, and I noticed my mom's expression twist with irritation and embarrassment as they all started to walk away. Aiden looked back at me, confusion written all over his face. Sophia continued to cry, while Emma remained mercifully asleep, oblivious to the chaos around her. As the cop guided them out, I lingered in the doorway watching them leave. It wasn't a burst of joy, not exactly. It felt more like a tired release. The chaos, the control games, the selfishness, it was all done at last. The policewoman glanced my way before heading off. If anything else comes up, don't wait to call us again. All right? She said, her voice gentler now. Thanks, officer, I answered, dipping my head. With that, my parents, Bailey, Mark, and the kids were out of sight. The cop departed, ensuring the door clicked shut behind her. And just like that, my world settled back into place. It took some time to wrap my head around it all. Honestly, I hadn't seen how much their endless hovering had weighed me down. It wasn't only the moving and mess. It was years of being told to drop everything for them, being the one they could twist when it suited them. I'd never been free to claim a true sense of my own territory, my own existence, but now I was. The day after, I took a bit to sift through the mess left behind. I knew I'd have to face the consequences eventually, but for once, I didn't feel like it was my job to patch things up. My phone showed a bunch of missed calls from my parents, each voicemail packed with furious tirades. Bailey's messages were stuffed with nasty words and orders, labeling me everything from greedy to cold-blooded, but I didn't mind. Mark had sent a few rambling texts about how I'd destroyed his family and traumatized his children. Dramatic, considering they'd been doing fine destroying themselves long before I stepped in. I cut off all their contacts. Block, delete, done. It's been a few weeks since that moment, and life's calmed down. I've found some quiet, and I've been able to zero in on my own path, my work, my buddies. I can breathe easy without always checking behind me, wondering when the next plea would pop up or when they'd appear demanding something. Sometimes I do wonder about the kids. They didn't choose their parents, after all. Maybe someday, when they're older, I can have a relationship with them separate from Bailey and Mark's chaos. Maybe I can show them that adulthood doesn't have to be a never-ending string of disasters and dependencies. But for now, this distance is what I need. I was content with my decision until last Tuesday when I ran into Aiden at the grocery store. He was with my mother, clutching her hand and looking smaller than I remembered. When he spotted me, his eyes widened. "Uncle Eric," he shouted, breaking free from my mom's grip and running toward me. My mother froze in the produce section, an apple suspended midair. Our eyes met across the distance. I knelt down to Aiden's level, surprised by the genuine joy on his face. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. You've grown. We live with Grandma and Grandpa now, he informed me, matter-of-factly. Mom cries a lot. Dad left. My stomach tightened. Left? 3 weeks ago, my mother said, approaching cautiously. She looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that ages you overnight. Mark couldn't handle the humiliation, as he put it. Took off in the night. No child support, no forwarding address. I didn't know what to say. Aiden was examining my shopping cart, oblivious to the tension. Look, Eric, my mother began, her voice strained but not hostile. What happened? Happened. I'm not here to guilt you. But these kids. She trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward Aiden. Did Bailey get a job? I asked. My mother's silence was answer enough. Come over for dinner, I finally said, surprising myself. Just you, Dad, and the kids. No Bailey. She's their mother, Eric. Then she can start acting like one. The invitation stands. After they left, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't regret standing my ground, but those kids deserved better than being casualties in an adult war. I'm still holding firm on my boundaries. My apartment remains mine alone. But last night, I sent my parents money for the kids' school supplies and set up college funds for all three. Anonymous donations to their future, not Bailey's present. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't clean or simple. It's messy and contradictory and leaves you wondering if you've done enough or too much. So, what do you folks think? Was I too tough on them? Did I push it too much? I'm not fishing for pity, but I'd love to hear your take on how I dealt with it. Did I make the smart move, or could I have handled it another way? I'd really like to get your opinions.